Welcome to Chamber Exchange, a TV show. My name is Tim Murray, President and CEO of the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce. And Chamber Exchange, a TV show, is an opportunity for us to bring in our member guests and organizations to talk about the work that they're doing here in central Massachusetts and beyond. The show happens because of our sponsors, and that's St. Vincent Hospital, a major employer and healthcare provider, as well as Bank Hometown, a growing bank in the region. And pleased to have with us on our first segment, Theresa Lynn, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Girl Scouts of Central and Western Mass. Theresa, welcome.
Thank you.
So people have heard of Girl Scouts, but maybe we could start off by you talking a little bit about the impact or something that our viewers might not know about Girl Scouts today.
I'm glad you started there because
All right.
I think everybody has a starting point of Girl Scouts, and I want to make sure you know the full range.
Yeah.
So we still do the troop model.
Right.
Girl Scouts, usually with a volunteer, might be a parent, meets weekly, and they do civic activities, they learn things, they do badges, they go camping. Right. All that's accurate. What we're also doing is bringing Girl Scouts to where girls are. Mm-hmm. So we are not waiting for girls to join troops or to find this on their own or their parents find it. We're bringing Girl Scouting into schools, into community-based programs, into housing developments, wherever girls are that would most benefit from Girl Scouts.
Right. And what was the evolution in that thinking in terms of being that proactive or rather than kind of just waiting?
The need is there.
Yeah.
What we have found in Massachusetts specifically is that in a lot of communities where we have a lot of participation in Girl Scouts, those tend not to be the lower than average median income communities. Mm-hmm. So we need to address the need we have in front of us. The other long-term research that Girl Scouts of the USA has is that the renewal rate is higher for girls in lower income communities. So in other words, they get involved in Girl Scouting, it sticks. They stay with it and they achieve all the benefits over time. Right. So that's where we need to be. How we got there though was there's barriers. It's a very low cost program. I don't want to, cost is always a barrier, but it's only about $40 to $100 a year to have a Girl Scout do Girl Scouting. Transportation is a huge barrier. So we have to go to where girls are. Mm-hmm. There's cultural barriers. Right. Some people aren't joiners. Some people see it as something that, if your parents didn't do it or your grandparents, what's your comfort level? So we're trying to overcome some of that by bringing it to them. Right.
And you mentioned research and impact. I believe there are some studies and information out there that, girls that are active and complete and stay involved with Girl Scouts, there are outcomes that are generally very positive.
The outcomes for college completion are very positive and also for academic success as well as career success. So in other words, kind of the takeaway is we're removing that barrier girls have to not being able to see what they can be. So if you're doing STEM badges and you're having exposure to all sorts of career paths from the time that you're kindergarten all the way through high school, your chances of saying to yourself when you're a middle school girl, oh, I could never do that, oh, that's not for me, we're eliminating that. Mm-hmm. Trying to keep that going so that girls stay with what they think they can be. Right. It's a confidence booster.
Right. And that some of that confidence is kind of just through exposure and learning. And you mentioned it's kind of almost a career exploration and a deep dive or substantive dive into kind of different career and educational pathways, right?
Right. And how I think it applies in Worcester specifically, or this area, this region, is if you have a growing economy, your biggest problem is your workforce, right? Mm-hmm. And don't we want these jobs to go to the people that live here? Right. So we want them to stay involved in the economies that we support, like STEM, healthcare, education. So growing a local pipeline, I think, is really, really important. I think Girl Scouts can play an important role in that.
Right. You've got a lot of ground to cover with Central and Western Mass, and this show appears on across kind of Central and Western Mass. But how do you kind of tackle that issue? Certainly there are urban communities like a Worcester or Springfield, but also you've got suburban communities and rural communities. How do you try to strive to have that access universally?
The long answer is we need to build capacity. Mm-hmm. So that's where we are trying to engage with philanthropy and with corporate partners. What would help us, I'm glad you brought up rural communities because that often, gets slid to the bottom.
Well, Western, Central and Western Mass,
There's a lot of rural communities with
rural
not
agricultural communities, yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot happening there, so that's an ideal place for Girl Scouts. One way we can do it is to make it easier to be a Girl Scout. So we can use technology, and we can use regional-based meetings. We can use meetups. We're also trying to get a van so that we can bring Girl Scout materials places. So if you're in a rural community, maybe we go to your library and then try to get you there. We also are trying to expand our staff, and we've been pretty successful at this, so that the need is so great that we can hire staff to keep bringing Girl Scouts into different locations. And we have a big commitment to the gateway cities out here, and as well as the rural communities.
Right. And so one of the things that you mentioned is kind of that involvement, staff, but also you're volunteer heavy as well, right?
Super volunteer heavy. We have 3,000 volunteers across the region, serving a little over 6,000 girls. So that ratio is pretty big. And if you know anyone who's been involved in Girl Scouts as a volunteer, it's not an easy lift. It's not going and sorting clothes at a shelter for a day. It is weekly. You've heard of cookie moms. You've heard of everything, right? So we really value our volunteers. But nationally, volunteerism is on the decline in terms of big commitment.
You need more Bernie Birches.
We need more of that.
Bernadine, if you're out there, we'll give you a shout out.
Yeah, we need more. But we also need to make it easier. So if you say you have employees that want to help middle school girls, but they can only do it once a month, you can come in and work on a badge with troops that's to your area of expertise. So you could do one on elected officials or government, and it's not a huge time commitment. And therefore you're supporting the other volunteers by taking a little work off their plate.
Right. And those badges, talk about like basic skills or really important skills in terms of first aid and things like that, but then there are badges relating to career exploration, and you touched on something that we hear every day, our staff of a dozen plus, single biggest issue in terms of our conversation and listening to our members is workforce. And a lot of those badges are kind of career exploration oriented.
They are very career exploration oriented, especially as you get a little older. And they're girl led, so you follow your path, but we encourage girls to take risks, to try new things, to get out, camping. A lot of that's outside your comfort zone the first couple times, right? Well, it's for me. I don't know about you, but there's bugs, but there's beauty. So trying to push girls to do things a little bit that would lead them to careers they didn't know about. And I think of all the jobs in labs. They don't all need PhDs, but those are good paying local jobs that would be great for a lot of the girls and Girl Scouts in this area. Right,
and credential and training programs that don't necessarily, that allow people to scale, earn and learn while they go to college, or if they choose not to, there's
a pathway.
There's a pathway, right. So if people want to learn more, they want to get involved, volunteer, what can they do?
You can get in touch with me via our website, gscwm.org.
GSC.
Yeah, and we welcome volunteers at all levels because we feel that we are in a sweet spot of government and business and providing civic engagement. So our girls see a problem and they try to solve it. They don't wait. They work with partners to try to solve community problems, just like Alexis de Tocqueville did in Democracy of America, right? It's like a group will form in America, and that's what our Girl Scouts do. So I think the Chamber is the perfect place for us because we work with business and schools and government to solve local problems.
And one thing I just wanted to touch on, you mentioned some of the different programs kind of designed to focus on different ages. Maybe you could just talk about how soon can a young person become a member Well, we're following what every other youth program is following, and we're starting younger and younger. You know, sports starts younger, everything starts younger, music, everything. So we are actually going into pre-Ks now. We're going into Head Starts and trying to sign up girls early to get them into, we start as young as daisies, and then the programs get a little more complicated and a little more in-depth as you move up the pipeline. All the way through
all the way through end of high school. Yeah.
These days, you've got your hands full in life. That's why we help you bank simply and securely with tools like Face ID and Touch ID. It's why we make it easy to make purchases on the go and get cash back while you're at it. why we help you quickly deposit checks wherever you are. And it's why we lend a hand with sending and receiving money right from your phone. So even when you're on the move, you can manage your finances. Bank Hometown. Unlock your potential.